Okay. If you are working on this video, you are doing so because you are working on trying to figure out what the message that's present in the poem Still I Rise is. It is likely you're sitting in my workshop class right now. So at this point, I expect that you have already worked through and read this entire poem and then summarized it in the left margin. If you haven't done that, your handout will have done it for you with the example. But what I would tell you right now is just for the sake of time, this poem over and over again uses the phrase "I rise." And it seems like this woman is saying, no matter what you do, I will always rise. Which leaves us, as we try to make our inferences, we're trying to figure out what does she mean that she's always going to rise? Why she's always going to get up? Well, get up from what? Rise out of what? Like, what is the message she's trying to send? And again, the way you're going to do that is to start looking at the adjectives and descriptions that she uses in the poem. So I'm going to explain these first 3 stanzas for you, and then you are going to finish the last 6. All right, so I'm starting off with, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise." All right, and if you're doing this, you're looking for descriptions. All right, so you may write me down in history. So the first thing is, if it's a description, you're really just asking the question of, like, well, how is this being described? What is this like? So if I'm looking at this and I'm like, you may write me down in history. All right, you may write me down. Well, where are you going to write me down? Oh, in history. So you're describing where you're getting written down by saying in history. Okay. Then, well, how are you going to write me down? With bitter, twisted lies? Whose lies? Your bitter, twisted lies. Okay. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. And this is important, but anytime you see the word like is a comparison word. It's a description. Like, he ran like the wind. How did he run? Like wind. Right? You play like Michael Jordan. How do you play basketball? In a similar way that Michael Jordan does. Those will always be descriptions. So if you ever see the word like, it is going to be followed by a description 80% of the time. Now you're looking at this and you're saying, all right, you may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still like dust I'll rise. Immediately, the first question that I would be asking is, who is you? Because what we get out of this is, you can write down in history, but he's going to write with lies and twisted lies. What I'd be wondering is, why is you writing lies? Ooh. Why is you writing lies? Okay. And then finally, who is I? Because all we know about I is that I rises. So why is you telling lies? Or why is I being lied about? And who are these 2 people? Okay, but then you come down to, does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? And as you're sitting at this one, you're asking yourself, all right, where do I see descriptions here? Does my sassiness upset you? No adjectives, no describing. Why are you beset with gloom? Again, no adjectives and no describing. Because I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. Okay, she walks, but how does she walk? This whole phrase is a metaphor. Metaphor being a comparison. But she's comparing the way she walks, and she's saying, I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room. And for us, that's going to be a tough line, because we don't live in Texas. We don't live in oil fields. So we should be asking ourselves, like, how can you possibly walk as if you own an oil field? Like, oil fields in your living room. But then we think, well, what do we know about oil? Well, oil is used for cars. We do know that there's like 100 million cars in our country, and gas is expensive. So maybe we're asking the question of, does she walk like she's rich? But if we're asking the question, does she walk like she's rich? That's an answer to the question of, does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? And gloom means anger or sadness, and sassiness means attitude. Are you annoyed by my attitude? Are you annoyed by my gloom? Is it because I walk like I'm rich? Does you not want I to be rich? Alright, and those are interesting questions. We're wondering who's you, we're wondering who's I. You is now telling lies about the I in this story. And I is wondering, do you not like me because I walk like I'm rich? Interesting. Okay, and now we're coming down to this third stanza. Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope springing high, still all rise. And there's so much description here. Just like moons, like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, all rise. Alright, so she's definitely comparing something. What is she comparing to a moon? What is she comparing to a sun? What is she comparing to the certainty of a tide? What is she comparing to hope springing high? Alright, take a second. Try to figure this out. What is she saying she is going to do? Alright, in your head you figured out, alright, well, she gives us the verb of rise. She's going to rise. Well, how is she going to rise? Alright, well, she's rising like a moon. She's rising like a sun. She's rising with the certainty of a tide. We're going to pause there. I'm going to think for a second. How do the moons rise? How do the suns rise? What does it mean to rise with the certainty of a tide? All right, and again, this is a little difficult for us right now because as we do this, we have to think about the moon. We have to think about the sun. And we think, well, how often does the moon rise? How often does the sun rise? And the answer to both those questions are every day. They come up every day. With the certainty of tides. A tide is when the ocean comes in and out. How often does that happen? More than once a day. Just like hopes springing high. How is she going to rise? Is she saying, she will always rise? But at this point, if she's so adamant about rising, why is getting up so important to her? Okay, so at this point you have a pretty thorough description. As I'm going to be walking around the room, I expect to see all of this highlighting and all of this writing on your paper as well. So if you don't have that now, I would pause and make sure you do this. But when you finish getting that written, you can close your laptop and begin working on the next 3, 4, 5, 6 stanzas with your partners. Alright? Put your hands up in the air if you have any questions.